Hello, everybody. I'm Tom Carpenter. Thank you very much for joining me today. Today, we're going to be talking about a recent executive order that the president issued on passport gender markers. Before we get too far into it, I'm not sure if anybody is. Oh, I see a comment there. So it looks like we are live. That's great. Um, and I just want to say, get a few things out of the way at the outset. Um, Specifically, this is where you can find me if you have questions about this webinar, um, and a few professional responsibility disclosures to get out of the way. This may be viewed as attorney advertising. It's intended to be for informational purposes only. I am not intending to provide specific legal advice in this session. By participating in this session, it does not create an attorney-client relationship between you and my law practice. Prior outcomes don't guarantee future results. So just because something was decided one way in the past by a court doesn't mean that that's what's going to happen next time. And that certainly is the case with the issue we're discussing today. And although I'm a travel attorney, I am not an attorney who specializes in immigration law or criminal law. And the topic we're talking about today may touch on those issues, but I'm not really qualified to talk about some of those issues. Just a little bit about me. I've been practicing law for over 30 years. Most of my clients are in the travel industry, travel and tourism clients, small travel agencies, and tour operators. I have clients around the country who I represent while in drafting documents and policies. And in addition to my law practice, I also own a small hosted travel agency. So today we're going to be talking about an executive order that President Trump signed on actually within hours of when he was inaugurated. And this executive order broadly deals with issues related to transgender, non-binary, gender non-conforming, intersex Americans. It has a few different components. It deals with some public facilities. Restrooms, shelters, and prisons are now required to be segregated based on your sex assigned at birth. There are restrictions, educational provisions for transgender children are under Title IX are now rescinded, or the executive order intends to rescind them. Federal funding for gender-affirming care is prohibited. And generally speaking, for initiatives that the federal government has in place for LGBTQ plus individuals, federal programs promoting or accommodating gender identity are being dismantled. But the thing we're going to really talk about today, because this is specifically as it relates to the travel and tourism industries, are federal IDs. The executive order now requires that legal documents have to reflect the sex assigned at birth, not gender identity, and that would include specifically passports, visas, and global entry cards. Before we get into kind of the executive order and the implications, I just wanted to kind of rewind a little bit to talk about what the legal framework is for passport gender markers. The lead case on this is not that old. It goes back to 2017. Zim v. Blinken, in previous iterations, it was known as Zim v. Pompeo, Zim v. Tillerson, and Zim v. Kerry. This case was brought by a U.S. Navy veteran who is intersex, meaning Dana Zim was born with both male and female genitalia. When they filed for a passport, they were required to either check the male or the female box on the passport application, but because Dana Zim has genitalia of both male and female, they could not check either box, and they filed a lawsuit. The district court in 2017 found in their favor. There were some appeals that followed, But the Biden administration in 2022 announced the creation of the X gender marker to accommodate individuals who are neither male nor female, and that was instituted as a result of the Biden administration. The Williams Institute has it's a little bit hard to find definitive characteristics of exactly how many Americans apply for a passport with an X gender marker each year, but the Williams Institute estimates that it's approximately 16,700 Americans each year. So that's the best statistic that I was able to find. So here's what the order requires, and I'm not going to reprint the whole thing here. You can look it up online if you want to see it. But the order requires that each agency and all federal employees shall enforce laws governing sex-based rights, protections, opportunities, and accommodations to protect men and women as quote-unquote biologically distinct sexes. And each agency has to give meaning to the term sex, male, female, men, women, boys, and girls. The meanings set forth in Section 2 of the order. We'll talk about that in a minute. And so this is a broad edict to the government saying you have to recognize male and female the way this executive order defines it. And you can't have anything that is outside of this fairly narrow definition of sex. It's important to note that the scientific community disagrees with the definitions that are used in this executive order. Basically, they note that sexual differentiation doesn't occur until 6 weeks after conception. The Trump definition doesn't take into account other things that scientists would consider to be determinative of sex, including genitalia, chromosomes, gonads, and hormones. And there's really no room in this definition for people who are transgender, non-binary, or intersex, which the scientific community has come to accept as being a legitimate condition for people. I like this quote by Neil deGrasse Tyson, which is, the good thing about science is that it's true whether you believe in it or not, whether or not you believe in it, not to misquote him. But there are lots of people who feel very strongly that there are only two sexes, male and female. The scientific community does not agree with that. And so I think it's really important that we separate our beliefs from what the actual reality is. And, I might believe that I am a fantastic singer. That does not mean that I am a fantastic singer. Let's continue on with what the order requires. Agencies shall remove all statements, policies, regulations, forms, communications, or other internal and external messages that promote or otherwise inculcate gender ideology, and shall cease issuing such statements, policies, regulations, forms, communications, or other messages. Meaning the government can't do anything that falls outside of recognizing only male and female sex as defined in this executive order. Agency forms that require an individual's sex shall list only male or female and shall not request gender identity, and basically enforcing this. And then going specifically to the travel documents, Secretary of State and Homeland Security and the Director of Office of Personnel Management shall implement changes to require that government-issued identification documents, including passports, visas, and global entry cards, accurately reflect the holder's sex as defined in Section 2 of this order, and Director of the Office of Personnel Management shall ensure that applicable personal records actually reflect federal employees' sex as defined by Section 2. So here there's a very clear, direct order in this executive order that passports, visas, and global entry cards all need to be limited to only allowing for male and female. So we're only a week into the administration, and here's what happened the first week. The president signed the executive order shortly after he was sworn in. That order requires a plan to be implemented. for the plan for this executive order to be implemented within 30 days and legislation within 60 days. There's also a requirement that all agencies that are affected by this order have to report on their progress in complying within 120 days. So this is moving pretty quickly, but also we're only a week in, so it's a little bit speculative to say what is going to happen from here on out. However, shortly after he was sworn in, after he was confirmed and sworn in as Secretary of State Marco Rubio ordered a halt to processing of passport applications with X gender markers, and ordered the agency to stop processing applications for people who wanted to change their gender. The interesting thing about this is that while it's been fairly widely reported, no actual announcement was made. If you go to the passport processing office, you're not going to see anything on there, no kind of press release or anything like that. And in fact, there's one publication that reached out to the State Department to ask them about what was going on with the suspension of processing applications with an X gender marker, and could they confirm that they are no longer processing applications to change gender on passports? And the State Department spokesperson said that they, quote unquote, do not comment on leaked internal documents. So if you are concerned that this is kind of happening under cover of darkness, I don't know that that's unfounded, actually. It's the news media is getting access to these documents and are reporting it. But this would be consistent with the executive order, but it seems to be happening very, very quickly. I am in my law practice already getting questions about this from travel agencies and travel advisors who have clients who have driver's licenses and passports with X gender markers who have travel in the coming days. Again, there needs to be a plan put in place according to the executive order within 30 days. And then within 60 days, there's an additional benchmark. So lots of people are asking questions. I've got a client who has a transgender, who is transgender, who's gender nonconforming, or who is intersex and has an X gender marker. Are they able to travel? What's going on? So I'm just going to break down some of these questions that I'm getting. And we don't have definitive answers to a lot of them, so I want to just be clear about that. But there are not only, the federal government controls passports, but states control driver's licenses. And currently there are 23 states and the District of Columbia that allow for the X gender marker on driver's licenses. You can travel domestically with a driver's license. You don't need a passport to travel domestically. But keep in mind that the Federal Aviation Administration and the TSA are both federal agencies that oversee domestic airports. And so they are bound by this executive order as well. So we're not going to necessarily know how they're going to be enforcing the executive order at domestic airports. But it's something that we're going to be looking at to try to make sure that that we have an understanding of what exactly is happening, so that we can advise, so that travel agencies can advise their clients when they're traveling. Can I be detained at customs and immigration? I'm tripping over my tongue here. Sorry about that. Generally speaking, and this is the way it works now, an immigration officer cannot detain you without having reasonable suspicion. Reasonable suspicion is less than probable cause, meaning there's a lower threshold, but you cannot be currently, you can't be selected for questioning based on your membership in a protected class like race or gender, religion. So obviously there's an issue here, because now that gender is being thrown out the window, I think there's an open question of whether or not suspecting that somebody is not the gender that suspecting that somebody is not the sex that matches their gender marker. The question is that going to be probable cause to detain somebody? The rules are that in order for an immigration officer to detain you, they need specific facts that make it reasonable to believe that you are committing or have committed a violation of immigration law or federal law. But keep in mind that this executive order does not make it a crime to be transgender, gender nonconforming, non-binary, or intersex. So, this is not a situation where, uh, well, this is not a situation where it appears that somebody could be detained on that basis, but we're waiting to see what the uh, implementation plan will be when it's released, if it is released to the public. Can you enter the country if your passport is not valid under the new rules? U.S. citizens cannot be denied entry into the country. However, the U.S. Intelligence Reform and Terrorism Prevention Act of 2004 requires that all persons, including U.S. citizens, traveling by air must present a valid passport to re-enter the United States. So conceivably, there could be a situation where if you are out of the country and try to enter the country with a passport that has an X gender marker, it could be the case that if the federal government determines that that passport is no longer valid, you could be required to get new travel documents before you return home to the U.S. But there is, again, because the full plan has not been publicized, there's really no guidance at this point as to whether or not somebody entering with a non-conforming gender marker will be admitted. But that to me, to my way of thinking, that would hinge on whether or not the U.S. government is going to declare those passports to be invalid. They're already stopping processing them, so I don't think that that's a stretch to think that that might happen. And then the thing that is most concerning to people is the question, can Customs and Border Patrol agents require a strip search? A strip search at the border is not a routine search. It has to be supported, again, by reasonable suspicion, and it has to be done in a private area. I think, the worst case scenario for people who are gender nonconforming is if they don't appear to be the gender that's on their passport or their gender marker. If you're transgender, if you're gender nonconforming, if you're intersex, if you're non-binary, if that is reasonable suspicion, then that you are entering without a valid document, we would hope that Customs and Border Patrol would not be verifying the validity of the passport by conducting a strip search. It seems like a huge stretch, but it's understandable why people are concerned about that. Questions about what happens next. Can travelers from outside of the U.S. enter the country with non-conforming gender markers on their passport? Every country determines the rules for entry, and the United States is no different. So residents and citizens of other countries who are coming to the U.S. can be refused entry if they refuse to answer immigration officials' questions and immigration officials' questions. They can also be refused entry if they have incorrect paperwork. Again, we haven't seen what the implementation plan is, so these are things we're going to be looking at to see what in the future the plan is if it's released. But I can tell you what Canada is saying at this point. Canada is advising holders of Canadian passports with the gender marker of X that they may still use their passports for travel to the U.S. However, they are urging travelers to exercise caution, especially when traveling to states that have laws that are targeting the LGBTQ plus community. Although in Canada they also include two-spirit, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, intersex, and then others. And the quote from the Canadian government, in some cases, even if your Canadian passport indicates an X gender marker, you may still be asked to provide binary sex information, either male or female, when traveling. And while the government of Canada recognizes the X gender identifier, it cannot guarantee your entry or transit through other countries. So That's what our neighbor to the north is telling their citizens about coming to the U.S. And again, we will see how this develops. The situation's very fluid. Just a couple of key takeaways before I'm going to try to go and take a few questions if I can. We still keep in mind we still don't have a full plan for implementation of the executive order, so I'm not intending to raise alarms unnecessarily, but it is fairly it was fairly clear from the campaign, and it was fairly clear from this from the speed with which this executive order was issued that the Trump administration takes it seriously, and that they absolutely intend to make it very difficult for transgender, gender nonconforming, non-binary, two-spirit, intersex travelers to travel with passports that reflect their gender. It is almost certain that there will be litigation over this. Keep in mind that travel restrictions can take effect very quickly. If you were around during the last Trump administration, you'll know that travel restrictions to Cuba happened overnight. There were cruise ships that had to turn around and go to a different port because they were on their way to Havana. That happened without any advance warning. Just in the last 24 hours, the Trump administration announced a travel ban for citizens for Colombian officials, as well as quote unquote their allies and supporters. That happened immediately, and then just as soon as it happened, it was the travel restriction was suspended. So if you've got whiplash, it's understandable. When advising your clients, if you're a travel agency owner or a travel advisor, you should direct them to the official government sources for guidance on what is required in order to travel. Although keep in mind, these changes are happening at least in the first week, these changes have been happening without an official government announcement. So you're going to want to keep monitoring developments as we get into this a little bit further. So that is what I have for you today. I know it's a topic that's of interest to a lot of people. I'm looking at this comments. If you enter a comment into the chat, I'll try to take questions. But again, keep in mind there are a lot of things we just don't know at this point. Donna is asking, if somebody has a passport and wants to get it changed, do they have to get a new one and not get a renewal? We don't have guidance on that yet. The government had, as we understand it, and again, the announcement wasn't made, if somebody is asking for a gender change to their passport, the State Department is no longer processing those. But it's a little bit unclear if somebody has the X gender marker, which is no longer valid on their passport, and they want to get something, they want to change their gender to either male or female in order to be able to travel. It's not clear whether that's an exception to the rule about not traveling, or I mean, I'm sorry, not processing changes. If somebody is transgender, their passports are okay if they're stating male or female on the passport. The executive order says that the passports have to match their gender. Sorry, the executive order says that the passports have to say either male or female, and that it has to be male or female of their sex assigned at birth. So that presents a problem for intersex people who might not have a sex on their birth certificate, as was the case for Dana Zinn initially, and then they changed the birth certificate. But the federal government executive order says you are either male or female, and you are male or female based on what your sex is, as the executive order defines it. And what the executive order defines your sex as, it is your sex assigned at birth. So if you are transgender, if you're a transgender woman, and your sex on your birth certificate says that you are male, the executive order contemplates that you would be reissued a passport that has your male gender, your male sex on indicated on the passport. Sorry, I'm tripping over my tongue here. It's a little bit late in the day for me. You're very welcome, Becca. And yeah, Donna, you're more than welcome. This is available on my law practice Facebook page and also my law practice YouTube channel. You're more than welcome to share it if you see fit. But I'm not sure if there are any other questions, but I'll just wait for a couple more minutes, a couple more seconds maybe. Okay, so I think that's all I've got for you today. But if you have questions about it, you can reach out to me. Feel free to let me know. And best of luck in dealing with the new regulations. We'll keep you posted. You can always check back on our YouTube page, our YouTube channel, our Law Practice Facebook page. We're also on LinkedIn. It's Carpenter Law Group. And we will continue to do updates as information comes available to us. Thanks very much and have a great week.